An emergency meeting, is being held by the Home Secretary after one person died when 1,500 migrants tried to enter the Channel Tunnel in Calais last night. Eurotunnel's revealed it's blocked 37,000 migrants trying to enter its French premises since January of this year. Douglas Murray is a columnist for The Spectator and an associate director of the right-wing think tank, the Henry Jackson Society. Joins us now, as you can see, from our central London studio. Thanks for joining us on Sky News this afternoon. So, Cobra meeting taking place, we believe, just at the moment. Not heard much from it as yet. What can the British government do?
If I could just start off by saying the Henry Jackson Society isn't a right-wing think tank, it's a cross-partisan organisation.
I do beg your pardon.
Firstly, what can it do? Pretty much what it's doing at the moment. This isn't a problem which has only one solution. It's an extraordinarily complex problem, which I've often said is probably beyond the abilities, really, of any one government to deal with. It's a problem which, first of all, starts with people leaving the countries that they're leaving, many of which, in fact, all of which are beyond our country's ability to change or to significantly alter. It then is the passage into Europe and then the passage throughout Europe. What we're seeing at Calais is just the last stage of that extraordinary global problem and the bottleneck we see at Calais. So there are immediate things that can be done, which I think are being done, but there's no easy way to solve this problem.
OK, so again, my question is, what can be done? What should the British government do? What would you like to hear as a result of that Cobra meeting today?
Well, I mean, to an extent, I'm slightly sceptical of Cobra meetings' ability to simply come up with fast answers to these things. There are, as I say, no fast answers to this. What can be done, which I assume the Cobra meeting will be arranging, is as an alleviation, if you like, of some of the scenes which we've seen in recent days and weeks around Calais. The situation there is obviously one which is being dealt with, to some extent at least, in cooperation with our French partners. But this is a problem of, apart from anything else, perception among migrants throughout Africa, the Middle East and beyond. And that perception is that if they get to England or Britain, that is the final destination of choice where they will be in some way better off than if they remain in France. But it's not only that problem, of course, it's also a language issue. Many of the migrants coming speak English, and so they wish to try to sort out a life for themselves in this country. As I say, there are immediate things which are pretty much being done at the moment, and then there are vast things beyond our control. But one other quick point about that, if I may. This is a problem which is going to grow, not only because of the disturbances around the world across Africa, North Africa and the Middle East, but also because traditionally this is a problem which increases as the summer goes on. The inflow of migrants into southern Europe pushing up through the rest of Europe will increase in the weeks ahead. So this is going to be an ongoing story.
How does the British government convince the French authorities that they potentially need to do more so we don't see the sort of mayhem that happened last night at the entrance to the Channel Tunnel? It does appear, according to some, that the French have basically just put their hands in the air and said this is a British problem.
I mean, it's obviously not a British problem. It's a French problem immediately there, and one for French law enforcement and border patrols. But as I say, I mean that is a problem for France. It's one which France, like many other countries, has very mixed feelings about, I would suggest. On the one hand, if the migrants were to make it to Britain, it would take a certain amount of the challenge off French hands. On the other, of course, they don't want to be seen to be losing control of the situation in Calais. The French authorities will simply have to do the best policing job they can, and the British government will have to do everything they can to help them in that task. As I say, there is a very, very significant problem here. This story keeps on flaring up. There are intermittent bits of it that keep flaring up. But the underlying story is so vast that I would suggest and urge governments, including the British government, that a lot of much deeper thinking has to be done about what to do about this. Dealing with the Calais problem is the final stage of this. But there has to be a lot more consideration of how we try to alter something which I think is possibly the biggest story of our time.
And that is potentially by changing the benefits system? here in the United Kingdom for people who are desperate to travel right the way across Europe, potentially from Libya and Eritrea and other countries beforehand, because they think that they will get a better life here?
Well, I mean, part of it, as I mentioned before, is that perception problem. There's no doubt about that. But I mean, also, of course, one has to say that, I mean, when they do get, if they do get to Britain, these migrants are by no means well off. I mean, they are subsidised to a small extent. It's obviously a lot more than the money they would get if they were at home, but they certainly don't lead lavish lifestyles. Nevertheless, they do see that there is a National Health Service here and many other welfare provisions which will make life very, very significantly better for them were they to reach there or reach here. But as I say, this really starts at the countries they're leaving from. The big challenge, which I say is maybe beyond this or any other single government in Europe, is what do you do about the fact that millions upon millions of people in Eritrea and sub-Saharan Africa and North Africa and elsewhere wish to come to our continent, and very many of them wish to come to this country. I think that there are parts of this debate we are having, but there needs to be a much wider debate about it, not least in order to be able to think a bit broader and a bit deeper about this enormous issue. It is not only about Calais. Calais is the final point in this, but it is about a global problem which this country and the whole of Europe is, I think, somewhat failing to address.
Douglas Murray, thank you for joining us here on Sky News.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.